に亡くなった祖母は旅が好きだった。見知らぬ景色、見知らぬ人々、見知らぬ者との出会いが大好きで、高い天井で育てば背が伸びるというように世界を広く持つことが人を大きくするのだと。そして高校2年の夏休み、私も遠くへ旅に出る。部活の合宿なのだけれど、これも旅には違いない。電車と車を乗り継いで私たちは南の海へ。剣と道着をカバンに詰めて鬼ヶ島を望む岬の山門へ。そこで私が出会うのは我が部を支える内女の子。旅先で知る新たな顔も出会いといえば出会いなのかも。相沢康美。ここよりさらに南から来た目的不明の先住者。ちょっと苦手かもしれない。キアン右は神代の剣を携えて神増島へと向かう国威の剣気。かやサラの木に咲く白の中、ひときわ異彩に咲き生える枯れずの赤い椿にも似た琥珀。そして私がたどり着いた夜、互いに惹かれ合うように波に運ばれやってきた少女。波。投げ入れられた6つの小石。
Hello. Hello and good evening, everyone. How are the audio levels? Oh, you can't see me right now, can you? You should be able to see me now. Hello. Hello and good evening. We are going to continue. How is Shiro? I like how you get admonished if you try to open one of the pages that there's no save data on. But last we left off, we of course had to reset the Yuri vampirism counters once again, as we found out that not only was there definitely really a ghost that was predating upon Ayashiro, but a ghost vampire who was like sucking spiritual energy from her neck. And not only that, but in one of the bad-ends that we got last time, Shoko got eaten by that ghost vampire, and in the other, which is where we are right now, we discovered that it was actually some sort of spirit projection from Yasumi, who is draining energy from other people, and Mikiwa almost killed her, because of course she is attacking her fellow students, but Shoko eventually did convince her to stand down. So this is where we stand for right now on the Yasumi route. Yasumi, of course, is the most normal of all the girls in the routes. Probably still. Mikiwa left the room, leaving Yasumi and me behind. The magically induced sleep still hadn't dissipated because the other team members hadn't stirred. Hello, Sarah. I see. Yes, I had to turn my air conditioning off. All right. Oh. Yeah, I don't know what that's from. That's fascinating, though. This is not what I want for an ASMR stream, though, so let me see if I can That should do it. Yep. Alright. When I briefly turned my camera back on, it turned its microphone back to pick up sound again, which it shouldn't be doing that because we don't need two microphones picking up my voice. Anyhow, I think Yasumi seems okay. She looks fine. In a world with just the two of us, Yasumi, empty like a doll, spoke in a hollow voice. Big teardrops rolled down from her huge eyes. She didn't wipe them away, but kept staring into empty space. Yasumi wasn't looking at me. In a world all alone, surrounded by hopelessness, she continued to sob. She didn't hear my voice. Like a mechanical doll that will repeat the same action until it winds down, she continued to lament. Perhaps it was from her tears, because a bit of the feeling she was experiencing entered her hollow voice. If she were talking about an island, then Urashima... What sort of karma bound Urashima and Yasumi together? Her eyes were just as hollow as before and didn't reflect anything in the world. But since she answered my question, Yasumi was becoming closer. I didn't know who it was dangerous for, but back at our homes, past this ocean, something like this doesn't really seem to have happened. In the cramped dorms, rumors of a ghost attack would have spread quickly, even reaching non-dorm students like Ayashiro or I. Whether the ethereal sleep was effective or not, in reality, Ayashiro saw it on the first night and Momoko on the following night. I didn't think that it would be so lucky as to remain unnoticed, which is the vampirism phenomenon, in the dorms for so many nights before. Though her mother's warning was correct, I didn't think that it was because of this situation. The tears reflected in the dim moonlight past the screens, and I could see some life in her hollow eyes. I was reflected in the tears that filled them. In the tears that poured out, her heart, which had deeply sunk, floated up to the surface. Yasumi's heart, which had warded itself off in order to not see such pain. Perhaps it was because I tossed in a small pebble. Her heart floated up from the abyss. Yasumi, who had hidden within herself since it was all just too much to take, was forced to confront the cruel reality and... It couldn't be contained anymore and spilled out. I embraced her. Yasumi, shivering, seemed about to break apart because of her inner turmoil. I wanted to protect her from the outside. I hugged her tightly in order to stop her shivering. I wasn't reflected in her tears anymore, but rather in her eyes directly. I nodded and gave a small smile, encouraging the inner Yasumi that seemed about to break. Yasumi entrusted her body to me and, with my encouragement, started talking haltingly about something about which no one else knew. as I said, completely normal, unrelated to events, Yasumi.
ネカタさんってクロウ様を祀っているネカタさん。ネカタクロウ流のネカタさん。
休みの実の字は美しいじゃなくて蛇年の実なんです。クロウ様は蛇神様だから。
ネカタ休み。
Nikata Yasumi, the daughter which preserves the snake, the daughter of the family which preserves faith towards Kuro-sama. That blood and name was the karma that bound Yasumi to the island.
じゃあ私が昔浦島で会ったことがある女の子は。
If Natsune-san was interested in Kuro-ryu and had gone to the island, it was natural to visit the successor Nikata Munetsugu. If Nikata had a kid around the same age, then it wouldn't be strange for me to have played with them.
私、島にいる間は全然病弱じゃなくて。
Then, in the memory of my dreams, the energetic child who had pulled my hand was...
休み。
私にはお姉ちゃんがいたって言いましたよね。お姉ちゃんの方が病気だったらしくって家から出させてもらえない人で、そのお姉ちゃんが亡くなった時にお母さんが私を連れて島を出たんです。こんなところにはいられないって。
It wasn't because of sentimental, painful feelings, such as remaining in a place that had traces of her daughter.
もしかして病気なんかじゃなくて呪いみたいなものなのかもしれませんね。
Perhaps her mother had feared that something dreadful like a calamity or a curse would transfer to her remaining child. It could be one who curses Kuro-sama and the descendants of those conducting his ceremony. The curse of the Oni king. Since Yasumi became a Kyuseki, or as we discussed last time, a ghost vampire, it might be a curse to transform an enemy into something like itself, making them an ally. Like how Mingiwa talked about the relationship between the Ushi-Oni and the Iso-Ono. It made one thing into something of a similar ilk.
私、学校に戻れなかったら、私。もうお父さんのところに戻るしか。この先どうなるかわからないですけど、それがいいのかもしれません。
Normally, if her father had been alive, it would be normal circumstances and the best thing to do. But after her mother died and Yasumi was left on her own, she cut ties with her father on Urashima. If it was just about the physical distance to the island, then there wasn't any reason for her to change her name from Nakata to Aizawa. Yasumi also didn't seem to know, but there was definitely a reason.
大丈夫よ。休みがそんな体質でも大丈夫。
I hugged her shivering body to reassure her that nothing would happen and everyone would return together.
だけど、ですけど、学校に戻ってもこうだったら、私は。
今日みたいに無意識に桃子や亮の親しい人、それから私たちを傷つけるのが嫌なんでしょう。疲れることをしないで、疲れたらちゃんと回復させるようにすれば、むやみに人を襲うようなことにはならないはずよ。
でも、
それでも疲れてダメそうな時は私から吸えばいい。
There we go.
この先ずっとなんて保証はできないけど、私が卒業するまではあなたの面倒見てあげる。
Even after I graduate, if we're not far apart, I could do something as small as this. Which is, of course, Shoko's saying something as small as allowing a ghost vampire to feed upon her. Which I think is very romantic of her.
私の力が及ぶ範囲であなたを助けて、あなたを守ってあげるって約束する。
I faced Yasumi and stuck out my right hand, folding 4 of the 5 fingers.
なんで
That's the most dramatic way I've ever heard someone describe offering a pinky promise. Why?
私は部長よ。部員の面倒を見る責任があるの。
だったら私やめますから。それなら翔子先輩、そんな約束しなくてよくなりますよね。
あんなに頑張って入った部なのに、みんなと同じ練習が無理だからって足を引っ張らないようにマネージャーとして残ったのに。
だって私翔子先輩に迷惑かけたくないから。私マネージャーですから。私が先輩たちの体調管理しなきゃいけない立場なのに、なんで部長だからってそこまでしなきゃいけないんですか。たかが高校の部活の部長じゃないですか。部と無関係な問題じゃないですか。
部長だから。
I was at a loss for what to say. Since I already said it, though, I could at least revise what I'd stated earlier. I couldn't erase the fact that I said it, though. That's why I placed my left hand on my chest and answered.
部長だからじゃないのかな。
At my words, my own heart pounded.
私が休みのこと、頑張ってる休みのこと、放っておけないからだと思う。
I like girls who try their best with all their might. It's not anyone in particular. I like all girls that try their hardest, but
多分そういう休みのことが好きで、好きだから放っておけないんだと思う。
翔子先輩。
this girl is probably special. Beneath my left hand, the beating of my heart was calm.
それに幼なじみでもあるわよね。一緒にいたのは数日で、しかも今でもよく思い出せない白状極まりない幼なじみだけど。
だってあんなことがあったから。私も正常に入学して先輩に会うまで翔子ちゃんが生きてるなんて思わなかったから。
8 years ago, there was an accident at sea. Natsume-san died, and I was on the verge of death myself. My memories of that time are still vague. But I was still here and could hold Yasumi like this.
お願いしてもいいんですか。
I
約
don't
束
mind.
してもらっていいんですか。
She was talking about my proposal.
私は嘘って好きじゃないし、嘘つきにだってなりたくないわ。
知ってます。嘘が下手だってことも。
私下手なのね。
はい。だから先輩の言葉は信じられます。
そう。
Finally, Yasumi smiled and her tense body relaxed. Until now, Yasumi had been bearing such heavy responsibility on her own shoulders alone.
翔子先輩。
Under the shadow I cast, Yasumi looked up at me and asked.
私翔子先輩のこと好きです。
Past her dark, wet eyelashes, I was reflected in the eyes that looked at me as she said those words.
だから私ももらうだけじゃなくて先輩にいろいろもらってほしいです。先輩が私を支えてくれるなら、私も私のできる範囲で一番近くで支えられたらって思います。私も私ができる範囲で助けたり守ったりしたいです。
Within my relaxed grip, Yasumi's arms intertwined with mine. Our skin touched as we drew near each other, and the distance between us reduced to less than 0.
近くにいてくれるんだ。
Not just for now, but in the future too.
約束してくれる？
はい、約束します。
The pinky I reached out intertwined with hers and clasped, making a ring. The shape wouldn't last after this, and it wasn't a ring finger, but it was still a ring, symbolizing the vow we exchanged.
指切った。
And And so we made an oath with each other.
それにしても何やら複雑な心境よね。私はね、私こそが旧世紀なんじゃないかってかなりのところまで疑ってたのよ。
翔子先輩がどうしてですか？
昨日休みが倒れたのって私と一緒の時ばかりでしょ。そして極めつけは夕べの肝試しね。何しろ私が幹に触れただけで
床先の椿の花が
It made the symbol of eternal life fall.
あの時確かに感じたのよ。私の中に何か大きな力が流れ込んできたの。
It was just like an oni that drained vitality, or a vampire. And that wasn't the only evidence. I could also think of another fateful connection.
心当たりを考えてみれば、私8年前にこの土地で死にかけてるし、あなたがそう思ったように実際の私は死んでいて、ここにいるのは鬼かもしれない。
そんなこと。
世の中何があるかわからないしね。
はい。
Just several hours earlier, I didn't think what had just occurred could possibly happen.
でもなんで怪しろなわけ？
It wasn't Momoko or I, who had plenty of extra stamina, but Ayashiro, who didn't have a lot of vitality to spare.
もしかして休みは怪しろのこと？
私は翔子先輩が。
Both blushing, we looked at one another.
ありがとう。
はい。翔子先輩のこと好きだったから翔子先輩は襲えなかったのかも。
それは納得いかないわね。
Anyways, I'll leave that aside for now. I looked over Yasumi's entire body as she was seated on the floor. Since she had been sleeping all this time, there weren't any injuries on the outside, and her pajamas were orderly too, but
右輪にやられてボロボロなんでしょう。
unlike the outside, the inner Yasumi, that was her soul, shouldn't have been uninjured. Considering that the thin arms stretching out from the puffed sleeves looked even paler than normal. Also, her legs and calves looked like they didn't have the power to support her own weight just now. It seemed that she didn't have enough power on her own, so unconsciously, her spirit supplemented that by draining energy from others. Because Migiwa and I interrupted, she wasn't able to do that, and in addition to her spirit, power with form was also being battered. In other words, Yasumi's body didn't have enough power right now. If left like this, she'll likely be even worse tomorrow morning. Well, it was today, since it's already past midnight now. In the worst case, the ghost vampire might appear while she's sleeping and attack someone nearby again. And though she was now aware of it, it might still come out when she's unconscious. I couldn't let that happen. There was also Migiwa, the Onikiri, to consider, but if she knew that she herself had hurt people close to her, this gentle, delicate, and empathetic girl would... Yasumi seemed to understand, also, because she didn't make a slight smile like she always did, and instead only nodded. Yasumi was weakened right now. She couldn't do anything about her weakened spirit by herself, and if that weakened spirit would also drag down her body...
私の力を吸いなさい。
でも。
At my invitation, Yasumi glanced at my arms, neck, and areas where my skin was exposed. She finally looked down, embarrassed.
でも何も遠慮はいらないわよ。
If she did, that would actually cause more problems. I couldn't think of any other way to keep her safe.
いえ、その心遣いはありがたいんですけど、こうして巣に戻るとですね、ちょっとどうやって吸ったらいいのか。
It is a common problem that lesbian vampires have, not knowing exactly how to drain energy, blood, or vitality from other people. You know, you often have to get in with the lesbian vampire community to get some tips and pointers when you're just a teenager. Although, you know, if you look online, there are places where you can figure this out as well. If they taught this sort of thing in schools, it would help out tremendously, but you know, they certainly aren't planning to add lesbian vampirism into the curriculum. Not with the current state of affairs.
何分無意識だったもので
Since she'd been doing it unconsciously, it'd be hard to look back and see exactly how she accomplished it. In addition, right now Yasumi wasn't a spirit freed from the shackles of her physical body, but a physical person. Touching Yasumi like this and being touched didn't result in any drain in power. That might even be a special ability, belonging only to the ghost vampire. Looking at Yasumi, who had an apologetic and uneasy expression, I made up my mind. Oni will eat a person whole, but that's because it's an easy and efficient way of obtaining the power in a person's blood. As an extreme, excluding the physical nutrients, eating the flesh was just an extra bonus after getting the spiritual energy contained in their blood.
ダメ元だけど、ヤスミ、私怪我してるわよね。
はい。
I slid my finger along the area between my neck and shoulder where Miggy's pole had grazed me. I'd forgotten about the pain and my excitement, but it was brought back when I stimulated it. It wasn't a large gaping wound, so the blood didn't really drip down, but when I touched it, I could feel it ooze onto my fingers. The space between my second and third fingers were coated in shiny red liquid. Putting my fingers to my tongue, the feeling in my mouth was... Well, at my age, I've been injured countless times and have tasted blood, but it had a hard-to-describe, unique flavor. It had the metallic taste of iron, but it was also somehow sweet. The mysterious flavor, melted by saliva, spread through my mouth. I was half in doubt as to whether this really did contain power or not, though. I once again slid those fingers across my wound. Whether it was because my fingers were wet this time, or because I was used to it, the prickly sensation had lessened.
傷口、舐めてもらえるかしら。
Yes, yes. This is, of course, the natural progression of things.
首筋だと自分じゃ無理ですもんね。でも唾液に消毒作用があるって言っても。
一応消毒した後の方がいいかもしれないけど、正確には私の血を舐めてもらえる？
This is a really good encapsulation of the story, I think. Right here, this one image. The wound hadn't closed yet. I held up my fingers wet with blood towards Yasumi.
私の血を飲んで。
That's not the angle I was expecting this CG to start out with. Yasumi had licked my fingers covered with blood, and now she put those fingers directly in her mouth. She put her mouth directly against my neck, a fountain of life. But the wound was light, so she couldn't drink it like water and had to dilute it with saliva before swallowing it down. She curved her neck, and for a few moments her lips left my skin. The air mixed with the saliva on my wet skin, and it felt cool. It was like the feeling of alcohol used to disinfect an injection site, and made my tailbone tickle.
なんだかお腹の奥がポカポカしてきて体が熱いみたいです。
It's seems the physical blood didn't stay in the stomach, but was brushing against the abdomen. Her wet eyes looked feverish as she peered at my face before putting her lips to my neck once again.
気分悪くなったりしない？
それは大丈夫みたいです。
Hello, Lappy. You've come in at a perfect time. We, of course, as is our custom, must reset the timer. But we're only resetting the Vampire Yuri timer. We still haven't had a taxonomy dump this week. Although I have confidence in Aoi Shiro. Yeah, it's not exactly the most flattering angle for Yasumi, and also just looking at her pajamas in general, I do think that the folds of her clothes are doing some strange things there. One moment as I reset the timer, as is our custom. It has once again been 0 days since the last Yuri vampirism incident. So you see, going to Mikiwa's route first, in Mikiwa's route, we really had no even hints of vampirism until the absolute end, whereas Yasumi's route, just chock-a-block full of girls draining vital fluids from one another. So, Yasumi and I stayed that way for a while. Perhaps she was talking in her sleep, but Nami's satisfied sigh made the two of us separate. After we parted, it felt a bit awkward. The two of us looked at each other, wondering what to do now. So, Lappy, if you are just joining us, what you missed is that they already had this very, very soft, wholesome, hurt-comfort exchange earlier, and basically made a pinky promise that they talked about as though it were wedding vows. And then, of course, they go into this, which I think they're really speedrunning their kink exploration. But, you know, teens on summer vacation. I think that this is normal, natural behavior, perhaps. Yes, I do think that perhaps you should disinfect the wound at some point. Yasumi looked flustered and went to get the first aid kit. In the morning, if Yasumi is okay, then we'll have to deal with this situation face to face in the light of dawn. Maybe it was better to talk with Mikiwa, since these sorts of things were her specialty. Mikiwa had returned to Shoshinji.
右はそっちはもういいの？今はもうあそこにいても無駄。え？かなり派手な血痕が残ってた。私は傷一つ負ってないし、長野もそんなに激しくないでしょ。まあ一応。その血痕、サラの森から降りてくる方から踏み石の向こうまで。
Mikiwa looked at the ocean.
島の方に向かっていたわ。
Hello, Momoko, my perfect daughter, who has never done anything wrong. We've reached day 4.
姫先輩、今日は顔色いいですね。
昨日はぐっすり眠れたみたいです。
それに比べてオサ先輩はあんまり顔色良くないですか？
I remained silent and thrust kumochi, which I held, at Momoko.
それで桃子はよく眠れたかしら。
面目ないでございます。
とりあえず昨べは何もなかったわよ。
やっぱり私が寝ぼけていただけなのでしょうかね。
In truth, a lot had happened, but I couldn't talk about any of it. Yasumi and I silently looked at one another. After the morning run was finished, we headed to Migiwa's room. Though Migiwa said we should eat separately from now on, if she wasn't going to attack us, I was willing to let bygones be bygones. Also, if she didn't suddenly show up for meals, everyone would probably get suspicious and think that something had happened, which of course it had. There was no sign of her in her room, however.
ちょっと私もう一っ走りしてくる。
The waves were full and the stepping stones had sunk beneath them. At certain points, the tops of the rocks peeked out from under the water, but considering the gaps between them, they couldn't be called stepping stones at this point. Migiwa wasn't here either. Migiwa had headed to Urashima to chase the Oni.
今朝も朝からボリュームあるわね。
お刺身、今朝までが限度かなって思ったので。
So that's why today's main dish was a rice bowl with grated yam and leftover sashimi from last night's temaki meal. I thought it was a bit heavy to be eating in the morning, but I gulped it down, maybe due to the grated yam, which acted like a broth. In addition, the light-flavored clear soup and fluffy rolled egg omelets were also a nice touch. Nami was munching down the omelets like candy. She only ate that and didn't even touch the rice bowl. Since she was still small, it wasn't good for her body or mind to have an unbalanced diet, so I was going to warn her, but I wonder what this plus sign here means after the M dash.
Hi, Nami-chan.
Ayashiro fed Nami the sliced up omelet, which had a soft, sweet flavor.
Hi. Nami-chan wa kawaii desu.
Like me, the vice captain should be displaying model behavior, but she'd fall into this plight.
まったく。
There was no point in stopping Nami anymore, so I cut up my own omelet and moved it all onto Nami's plate. Seeing what I did, Momoko grinned.
何？
やれやれですよね。
My cheeks warmed and I used the palm of my hand to cool them. Geez, what was with this good grief? Now this is definitely a fan translation sentence. Geez, what was with this good grief? She didn't have Nami's affliction, so if she just said something, she should come out and say it. Ayashiro continued to feed Nami like how a mother bird feeds a chick in the countryside. Looking at Ayashiro, who was happily playing with Nami, the monk Yukai said in a cheerful voice and smiled.
ゆうべはたくさんいただきました。
Last night, the monk had prepared tamaki, and now it was the grated yam rice bowl. The ingredients used were almost all local to Unasaka. It really was like a practical practice of using good local meals to maintain a healthy body. The monk gave a big nod, and this cleared up one big worry. For a while now, the monk had been keeping watch on his old-fashioned television with the legs attached to it. The unfamiliar announcer reading the weather report was probably from a local station.
大きな低気圧が近づいており。
It seemed the accursed karma that had caused bad weather when Kurosama's festival was near was still growing strong.
気が持ちそうなのは今日いっぱいまでですか。
うちが雨風何度にびくともしない立派な寺ならよかったんじゃがの。
Reality was just the opposite, and the first impression that ancient, renowned temple gave was that of a deteriorating building. Though, if it were just the morning dew, it would be fine.
少し繰り上げた方がいいみたいですね。ですけど、そういう時こそ人手があった方がいいんじゃないですか。
お嬢さんらが屈強な雲水なら、わしも遠慮なくこき使ったじゃろうがの。なに、節操一人。
The monk's eyes abruptly looked towards Nami, who was still eating the fluffy rolled omelette.
ああいや、節操と小さいお嬢さん一人ぐらいならどうとでもなるわい。
That's right. When we returned home, that means we'll also be parting from Nami.
ナミちゃん。
どれ、よろしいですかな、お嬢さんが。
We still didn't know anything about Nami's origins and couldn't hide our worry about what might lay ahead with her. The monk said in a bright voice,
もし寺の屋根が吹き飛ぶようなことがあったら、近場の檀家に避難するのでな。
he closed one eye and emphasized that we had nothing to fear.
さすがにこれだけの大人数ですと、田舎の家が広くてもちょっと入りきれんわい。
はい。
In a roundabout way, he made it clear that even if we'd stayed, it would just cause a lot of trouble.
そういうわけでみんな帰りが早まったって各自連絡しておいて。今日は練習なしで自由時間にするけど、荷物をまとめたり掃除はしっかりやって。
Using the excuse that we were cleaning up after the meal, Yasumi and I headed to the kitchen.
ねえ、やすみ。これからどうする？
どうするって？
この先へ行くか、今までのところに戻るか。
What do we do now? The training camp was almost over, and if we just sat passively by, we'd be able to return with everyone to Seijo without incident. Was that okay? Was that the right decision? What should we do?
先輩はどうすればいいと思います？
All right, now. This is a choice between leaving right now or going over to Urashima. And since we're so far into Yasumi's route, I'm just going to reveal to everyone that going to Urashima is the way to advance her route, and leaving is the way to reach another immediate end. Now, since we've already done this immediate end several times, and I don't believe that Yasumi's version at this point is appreciably different, we're going to go to Urashima.
私は。
My grandmother, who died a long time ago, was a person who felt that karma was an important thing. Akiko-san, who was the reason Natsune-san and I came here 8 years ago, felt that mysterious, unseen bonds were vital. That's why,
だと思う。
from those few days with Yasumi in the past, to meeting her this year at a faraway school, many years later in a chance encounter, I felt that it wasn't just extraordinary, but that something important was contained in that bond. And there was also the karma of having Unasaka being chosen as the location for this training camp.
次の干潮は夕方ですね。
向こうに着く頃にはもう暗くなってるかもね。
はい。
Yasumi and I would cross over to the island at dusk. Since someone might object if we told them about it, we decided that the two of us would secretly sneak out.
みんなに迷惑かけちゃうわね。
はい。
I wondered what people would think about me abandoning my role as captain and running off to attend a personal matter. Although Shoko, I think that more likely people are going to be whispering a lot about the captain and the manager running off in secret during a summer camp. after constantly making eyes at each other over the breakfast table. But even so,
私はそれでも行ってみるべきだと思う。
はい。
as Yasumi looked me straight in the eyes, I nodded. It would be okay. So the morning passed, and soon it was time for lunch. Even if you don't do anything, time, which is absolute, will still tick on by. As for humans, even if we do nothing special, we'll get hungry just by existing. And so, today's lunch was a Chinese-style meal. It was mapo tofu and mapo eggplant, which could be made with for large quantities of people all at once using a large pot and fire. The soup accompanying the dish contained dried shrimp and bok choy, which really gave a Chinese feel to the meal. In front of such a menu, there seemed to be one unsatisfied person, however.
ザワッチ。はい。
It was Momoko, who'd been established within the team as saying that she liked what she liked, and it can't be helped since it's Momoko. Because of that, I didn't pay much attention to her, and I started eating. Since this was Momoko, she'd probably say something like, "There's only minced meat in the mapo tofu," or "There are far too few dried shrimp."
なんかオサ先輩のやたら大盛りじゃないですか。
However, that wasn't what Momoko said.
そんなことないよ。いいえ、そんなことありますね。
はいはいはい。
I stopped Momoko, who was going on and on about her dissatisfaction with the portion sizes.
まだおかわりはあるんだからがっつかない。
私が言ってるのはザワッチの愛の問題であって、麻婆豆腐の量なんていうケチな問題じゃないのです。
I see. Polycule drama. Though I knew it wasn't good that Yasumi favored me, it made me a little happy.
ナミちゃん辛かった？
The main point was that Yasumi didn't seem to be listening to any of this. It was now the time when the waves would start to recede. As if the setting sun in the west was also being dragged down. We didn't take any large luggage, and hand in hand it looked like Yasumi and I were simply going for a walk. Acting like we were lovers meeting to elope, we avoided other people's gazes as we headed towards the forbidden place. Before us was an ocean bathed in gold. The waves were still in the middle of receding, but a road was already starting to appear beneath the water. That forlorn road led to Urashima, the place where Yasumi was born. The waves were only about 80%, but near the shallow shore, black rocks glittered in the setting sun, and we could see the road form.
最後にもう一回だけ確認するけど。
翔子先輩の方こそいいんですか？半分以上進んだらもう戻れないと思いますよ。
いいのよ。
This would be the first step. The gap between the rocks wasn't as wide as the ocean, and even the stride of a person could cross them. I proceeded first. Turning around, I reached out my hand to Yasumi, who was still standing on Unasaka's shore.
足元気をつけて。
ジャージで来ればよかったです。
確かにね。
As Yasumi jumped across the stepping stones, her skirt fluttered. Along with the wind, it was soon wrapped around her.
でもそれだと桃子に見とがめられるわね。
はい。
Since Momoko was a person that cared about Yasumi, she definitely would have noticed Yasumi changing clothes like that. If she realized that we were just going to run off on our own, Momoko would surely be angry and have both of us return. The sun was already on its way down, and because of the wind and spray from the sea, I didn't feel much warmth. I was worried about Yasumi's stamina, but if we were going to rest, we'd have to make it to the other side first. I wondered, how long has it been since the two of us departed from Unasaka? The sun sunk down into the horizon, and the golden ocean was bathed in crimson, as if the Hino Kusuri had been poured on it. And remembered that Hino Kusuri was the legendary medicine that I believe Yasuhime was said to have used. The receding waves reached their lowest point. From here on out, the sky would get darker and the moonlight would increase as the waves slowly rose again.
ここまで来たら戻れないわね。
はい。
We had already passed the time and place where we could have returned.
正真正銘一連卓章ってこと。だから全部話してくれない？
I felt that Yasumi, Nakata Yasumi, hadn't revealed the whole story to me yet. She might not know about the curse of the Oni King, but she still knew more information that might help her resolve her body's condition. We'd only have a chance to talk about this today, and we had moved forward without thinking. However, I wanted information about what we should do once we arrived at Urashima.
ネカタの家が代々黒竜なんて憲法を継いでいるのはですね、牛の首を切るためなんです。
牛の？それって生贄？
生贄といえば生贄ですけど、クロウ様に捧げる生贄というよりは神楽と一緒で神話の再現をしているわけです。島の人の汚れを移した牛の首を切って海に流すことで、また一年きれいな体で過ごせると。
So, Yasumi was saying that it was like Nagashibina. I'm not familiar with that. A festival where dolls are floated down a river out to sea.
他に話せることは？
私のお姉ちゃんのことなんですけど、私は死んじゃったって聞かされただけで、実際にお姉ちゃんの遺体とか見てないんです。
So, she wasn't dead, but her whereabouts were unknown. Urashima Taro, who was spirited away, was said to have returned 300 or 700 years after the fact. Yasumi's older sister, who had disappeared. I didn't know if it was related to the current situation or not, but to use that as a premise, Yasumi continued.
ちょうどその前後のことだったと思います。肌も髪も白い、眼帯をしたよその人がお父さんに会いに来てたって。
眼帯？
医療用のやつじゃなくて、銀色のつば眼帯みたいな時代錯誤な変な眼帯だって。それでうちの家に妻子を伝えたのがですね、赤眼白髪の陰陽師だったって。
赤眼白髪の陰陽師。
Over 100 years had passed since those religious rites were passed to the Nakata family. There might be some sort of connection there. Just as I'd heard, the stepping stones were fantastically shaped, jostling against each other. This only increased as we neared Urashima. They were like pillars of an ancient sanctuary, or grave markers. Standing upright, this natural marvel greeted Yasumi and I.
ここも禁足地なのよね。
はい、島の人は絶対に立ち寄りません。私もここにはほとんど。
Whether because it brought up bad memories or just because it was hard to explain under the shadow of the black rocks, Yasumi looked down.
いるとしたら、よそから来た私たちみたいな罰当たり者だけか。
はい。
And it was not Yasumi but myself who should have memories of this place. 8 years ago, at a time when the boats didn't cross If I'd come to this island, I had to have crossed the stepping stones. A memory of 8 years ago. The rocks dyed red by the crimson sun shone in my eyes. Red. The red noise got in the way of my image and my memory. The pain accompanied by recalling that scene hindered my memory.
休み疲れた？
まだだ。ごめんなさい。先輩には正直に言わないと迷惑かけちゃうかもしれませんね。
ここでもいいし、風がない場所なら洞窟の中とか適当に入って休む？
休むんでしたらもっといい場所を知ってます。
Oh, nice.
クロウ様の禁足地が広いのはこの森を守るためなんだって聞いたことがあります。
禁足地とかじゃなかったらあっという間に観光名所ね。
この森で取れるもので薬を作っているんだってお父さんから聞きました。病気だったお姉ちゃんは毎日それを飲まされていて。
火の薬
かもしれません。名前は教えてもらってないんですけど。
There did seem to be a crimson-colored medicine. It's been passed down through the generations. Oh, forgive me. I seem to be stricken with sleepy girl syndrome, particularly harshly today.
実はお姉ちゃんと入れ替わって1回だけ飲んだことがあるんですけど、その後熱を出して倒れちゃったんですよね。
それ薬なの？
お姉ちゃんは小さい頃からずっと飲んでたからすごく濃い薬になってたらしいんです。
A high enough concentration of any medicine would make it into a poison.
そういえば和尚が火の薬は2を使った劇薬かもしれないって言ってたけど。
Yasumi, do you have heavy metal poisoning?
でもこの森で取れる材料ならやっぱり床先の椿なのかしら。
If that tree sealed Matamu, then poison might be running through its flowers. For example, if Matamu were an Ushioni, then Yasumi, who was poisoned by it, might become something like a Nuriona. No. I must be thinking too much. But still, what happens to the humans that drink the Hino Kusuri?
先輩、こっちです。あ、翔子ちゃん、こっち。
My sunken memories fluttered and floated to the surface. Though the details were still vague, the faded memory had lost its color. But even so, the color of the Tsubaki shone through clearly.
ねえやすみ、昔こうして一緒にこの森を歩いたわよね。あなたが私の手を引いてくれて。
Yes, and then
この先にある祠に連れて行ってくれて。
翔子先輩。
I took Yasumi's hand and walked forward, causing her eyes to widen as she wondered at what I was doing.
そう、こっち。
I pulled on the hand I was holding and headed towards a place up ahead.
やっぱりあった。
Deep within the forest of Tsubaki, where the salty wind had died down, there was a small stone room that resembled a burial mound. In the past, that girl led me here to what was called the Tsubaki Shrine. And within this place,
こんなところに。ところで先輩、なんだか森の雰囲気が変じゃないですか？息苦しいっていうか、窮屈な感じがするっていうか、なんだかここ怖いです。
確かに。
whether the air in the forest had a different air pressure or the density had changed, there was definitely a strange, oppressive feeling.
マタムの封印。例えば長い年月のせいでマタムが力を蓄えて、それで封印がきしんでいるとか。単に力ある木がこれだけ
Yasumi didn't deny or confirm that. Of course, I didn't know either myself.
とりあえず祠の中へ入りましょう。
Within the shrine was a large megalith with an indentation. It resembled the Sakefune Ishi in Nara. Yasumi sat down to rest on the rock, which also resembled a stone bed. Whether it was a coincidence or constructed on purpose, the indentation on it looked like that of the shape of a person. We'd come to Urashima to look around, but what should we do now?
やっぱり休みの体のことは目方さんが一番知ってるんだろうけど、さすがに正面から門を叩いて娘さんがカクカクしかじかってわけにはいかないわよね。
そうですよね。ですね、私が本を好きになった原因だと思うんですけどね。お父さんに古い本を見せられたことがあるんです。
古い本？
私には黒竜を継ぐのは無理かもしれないけど、勉強して難しい本を読めるようになったら根方の才藝は継げるかもって。そう言って家に代々伝わる古文書、和とじのすごく古い本を見せてもらったことがあるんです。お姉ちゃんが飲んでいた火の薬の作り方もそれに書いてあるんだって。それで私頑張っていっぱい本を読むようになったんです。いつの間にか本を読む面白さの方にハマってしまって。
なるほどね。葵先生が休みにはあんまり教えることがないって他の教師に嘆くわけだ。じゃあもしかしたらその古文書になら。
はい。
There might be some method of dealing with Yasumi's condition recorded in those tomes. Even if such a method wasn't written down, if the Hinokusuri really were a miraculous medicine that could cure any illness, if Yasumi had enough stamina, then she might not need to drain the spiritual energy of other people.
できればお父さんがいない時にこっそり入ってこっそり持ち出したいです。
私が様子見てこようか。
え？
休みが捕まるとまずいでしょ。
ちょっと待ってください。
Flustered, Yasumi stopped me as I was about to leave. She took out a handkerchief, spread it on the rocks, and folded it into quarters.
ハンカチだとやっぱり折りづらいな。
何をしようとしてるわけ？
式紙を作って様子を見てきてもらおうかと。
式紙って？
I thought of the Morio, a type of kappa that Migiwa had rebuffed last night. Those familiars with a temporary body turned into black dust and smog, something like smoke, after being defeated.
折り紙で鶴を折ってそれに息を吹きかけるとですね、生きてるみたいに飛ぶんです。それでその鶴にカメラがついてるみたいに鶴の行ったところにあるものを見聞きできるんだとか。
っていうか、休みってそういうことできたの？
できます。
She gave a shy and abashed smile.
でも幽体離脱って言うんですか？あんなことだって今までできなかったんですよ。
いや、あれもあなた無意識にしてることだから。
今ならなんとか自分の意思で幽体離脱？
先生は脱婚って言ってたわね。
私が幽体離脱すればこの場にいながらにして様子を見てきたりできますね。できなかった逆上がりとか一度できるようになっちゃうと簡単だって言うじゃないですか。
I'm not sure I've ever heard that saying, and I don't entirely know if it's true. I'm trying to envision how one might do a somersault on a horizontal bar. Is that like the thing you do as a child where you have your arms sort of locked in place and the bars at your waist, and so you just sort of like roll yourself over it? It seems fundamentally very different to me than a regular somersault.
できるの？逆上がりはともかく
Yasumi, who had less stamina than normal, used a bicycle to accompany us during our running practice.
とにかくできると思います。前に雑誌とかの特集で幽体離脱のやり方とか読んだような気がしますし。
どんな雑誌を。
I've heard of people who just read random things, but this wasn't about cooking, sundries, or a health magazine. Maybe normal magazines also had articles about such things and special summer editions talking about ghost stories. But no, Shoko, I think you need to accept that Yasumi is probably into the niche occult hobbyist magazines. I don't really read magazines, so I don't know.
最初は横になってリラックスして。じゃあ、ちょっと失礼します。
Yasumi lay down on the pedestal, which just happened to be shaped like a bed. The indentation on the top of the pedestal was perfect for restraining a person. I came here with Yasumi and then... Yasumi's voice. I turned around behind me. Although I didn't see her there.
休み？あれ？見えませんか？ちょっと待ってください。先輩も見ようと思って見てください。
休み。脱婚できたんだ。
はい、この通り。
The consciousness of the spirit, unbound from its physical form, might reside in the head, the mind, though, as usual, it really was like a ghost.
服は。
はい？
休み。どうして服を着てないの？
An apt question.
服は私の魂じゃないですから。
I think that's valid, although, personally, clothes are part of my spirit. If I did astral project, I would have a number of different outfits and an extensive wardrobe.
しょうがないじゃないですか。幽霊になりたてなんですから。
休みが気にしないなら別にいいんだけど。
そう言われるとなんだか恥ずかしくなってきました。
Her face turned red, and whether it was because she wanted to disappear or not, her body slowly faded.
行ってきます。
At the very end, she snuffed out and vanished.
休み？ねえ。
Yasumi wasn't in her body. This was the first time that I'd seriously looked at her from such a short distance away.
もしもし。
As soon as I answered the phone, I was scolded.
その浦島に。
ちょっと金属地って話したじゃない。幼いさんも相沢さんもちゃんとした真面目なことと思ってたのに。これだから最近のバイクは。ちょっと待って、鈴木さんと相談するから。
ああ、かけ直してくれればいいのに。
It seems that they were having a discussion on the other side of the phone, so I was just here on hold. That was a bit... Because Sensei and the monk didn't know that Yasumi was Nakata-san's daughter, it had turned out like this. But how many years had passed since Yasumi and her mother had left the Nakata household? It's said that during their growth period, children can look completely different after a period of only a few years. This was especially true for girls, who could give an entirely different impression after changing their clothes and hairstyle. So, here's our first choice of the night. Should we, in this instance, go and infiltrate the Nakata household directly, or try and politely refuse and say that we'll just hang out in the shrine? Very well. Because you are so hesitant about it, Lappy, I'm actually just going to go with your suggestion at first. Nothing ventured, nothing gained.
補欠にいらずんば孤児を得ずか。
With the monk's introduction, we could enter the stately Nakata mansion from the front door. If we went to the Nakata mansion and Nakata-san affirmed what we did, then if something happened, he couldn't pretend that he hadn't seen us.
じゃあお願いできますか。今は島の中にある祠洞窟で休んでるんですけど。
After waiting a while, the call ended. I felt like we were going anyways, that we should go sooner rather than later. Since Yasumi was scouting out the mansion, if I headed there, we might meet along the way. While thinking that, I reached down to touch Yasumi, who was lying on the pedestal, to carry her. At that moment, Yasumi's eyelids fluttered a little.
休み戻ってきたの。
はい先輩ただいま。
どうだった。
お父さんまだ家にいます。あんまり近づくと気配でバレちゃうかもしれないんで家の中とか見られなかったんですけど役に立たなくてすみません。翔子先輩の方は何かありました？
先生から電話が。家にいたって言うんならお嬢からの連絡もそろそろ受けてる頃よね。休み今からネカタの家に乗り込むわよ。
そんなちょっと心の準備が。
All right. Now, let's see. All right, here's our next choice. I'm not entirely sure which one is easiest to parse here. Can't fight with hungry. Or let Yasumi rest. Well, Lappy, you've said slurp. And I think in the interest of increasing the Yuri vampirism counter as high as we can, it's best to do things promptly. But there's also the saying that if you're rushed, you won't think properly through things. However, I really should prepare as much as I can within the limited time allotted to us. Right now, the only thing we could really do was...
その前に休みは使った分の力を補充しとかないとね。
I hugged Yasumi's body, and also something other that resided there. The reason a person has a physical body is because without it, the soul, power, with form, can't maintain itself. That's why Yasumi should have used a lot of power when she left her body just now.
そんな大して役に立たなかったし悪いですよ。
大事なのは役に立つ立たないじゃなくてあなたが疲れたか疲れてないかなの。幸い私は先日のあれ以来変に力が満ちているような状態だから大丈夫。
Perhaps the life force of the Tsubaki that never wilted resided in my body now, because I was overflowing with a mysterious power. I didn't think there'd be any harm if Yasumi drained a little of it.
じゃあ
She looked down as if embarrassed, and then peeked up at me.
首からですかね。やっぱり
Just like Yasumi, I was embarrassed as well.
好きなところからでいいわよ。
そう言われてもじゃあ行きます。
Her thin arms wrapped around my neck, trembling as the distance closed between us. Starting with the wrists and ankles and other places where the boundary between the inside and outside world was thin. This included the neck, where beneath thin skin ran what could be called the road of life, carrying both blood and vital energy. And a place that could be called my own life, My senses were becoming more acute. My neck captured the warmth of Yasumi, who drew near, and before her lips touched me, the hairs on the back of my neck had already stood up. Though I'd already experienced this yesterday, my body was still nervous and stiffened a bit. If Yasumi knew about that, she'd probably stiffen up as well. I wanted to at least do something about my outward appearance, so I took a deep breath and tried to relieve the tension in my body. But the direct sensation of Yasumi's sigh against my skin made me stiffen up again. It was hot, damp, and gentle. No, maybe it was because it was all of those things. After that sigh, her lips touched me. Yasumi gently pursed the softness of her lips into a more aggressive shape as the gaps between the two of us were buried. The ring of her lips was almost perfectly airtight, and only within that circle did her saliva wet my skin. Thank you, Bismuth. Hot, damp, and gentle title of your sex tape. Sadly very relevant for the way that this game is written. It had already stopped bleeding, but the wound from yesterday hadn't completely closed. If you sucked a little strongly, the blood should slowly well up from inside. Well, you say that, Shoko, but we only saw that other CG about 20 to 30 minutes ago, and your wound was on the other side. It's alright. I forget things like that because I'm gay too. Yasumi's sucking was very weak and might have even lost to a baby suckling milk. It's not a competition, Shoko. If you were drinking juice with a straw, that would be just enough force, but unfortunately my blood wasn't so easy to obtain. I've heard that the milkshakes at Haku were regulated so that the amount of force needed to drink it was equivalent to that of... Hold on. Sorry. Sorry. I'm just taking a moment to reflect on the fact that a written sentence in this game is the protagonist thinking about how at McDonald's, not McDonald's, but at McDonald's, she heard that they make the milkshakes just thick enough so that it's the exact same sensation of sucking on a titty when you're a baby. And yes, Lappy, I too am astounded that this is what she is thinking about in this situation with a girl she's clearly down bad for. More than the area where her lips touched, it was the soft weight of Yasumi's body on my entire self that made me tingle. I'm sorry, one moment. I have to take a screen cap of Shoko's face here. It is compelling. Yes. Very compelling. Now, just allow me to post this momentarily, and all will be well. There we have it. She removed her lips from my neck and said that. Was she afraid of hurting me? of continually drinking blood in the future, of changing into something not human.
それに恥ずかしいです。
It was also embarrassing for me.
休み
I tapped her stiff arms, indicating that it was okay, and once again brought Yasumi's face to my neck.
先輩
Yasumi pursed her soft lips and sucked with all her might at the blood that ran beneath my neck and contained my life's power. In the storm to come, if the flame of Yasumi's life would not flicker and disappear, then I could endure this, as long as I could support her.
ごめんください。もしもし、ごめんください。
どなたかね。
A stiff voice answered us. White robes and white hakama pants floated up through the darkness. The lamps lining the road in the moonlight couldn't illuminate the wrinkles of the face entering old age and made them look significantly deeper. He had few smile lines around his eyes, and the wrinkles connecting the edges of his mouth and eyebrows stood out. He wasn't very tall, but even though through the white robes, I could tell that he had trained his body to its limit. The impression was that of a tempered steel, which was continuously forged until all impurities had been hammered out. I barely managed to stifle a startled gasp.
ああ、君たちが昇進寺の鈴木さんが言っていた。
He didn't even try to smile politely, but said that in a melancholic voice. Since it was said in a calm, low, but not rough tone, the intimidating air created by his appearance lightened up slightly. It was only a tiny bit, though. He looked more like a warrior than a Shinto priest. No, perhaps that stern manner, which caused people to keep their distance, was fitting for a priest that worships God.
成城女学院の幼いと相沢です。
よろしくお願いします。
The monk might have already mentioned Yasumi's first name, but just in case, I only gave our family names. In addition, I'd try to be the only one speaking.
この時期に踏み石を渡ろうなどとは随分とまた無茶をする。まだ荒れてはいないようだが、それでも海に落ちたら命を失うかもしれない。君たちはまだ若い。そう命を粗末にすることはあるまい。
はい。何ですか？
なあ、失礼。なんでもない。君たちのような外から来る若い人間が珍しかったものでね。何しろ観光客も寄りつかない何もない田舎の島だ。
やっぱり大変ですか？
何らかの形で祭りは残るだろうが、根方の神事は私の代で耐えるかもしれないな。
After that, Munetsugu-san had to leave the house for a while to do preparations for the ritual. Chundo, would you like to come join us and do preparations for the ritual as well? Chundo would not. She's bathing herself in the kitchen. We knowingly entered a stranger's house. No, that wasn't it. This was Yasumi's house, and the placement of things hadn't changed much since the days that she lived there.
懐かしいな。お父さんの書斎はこっちです。多分この部屋のどこかにあると思うんですけど。
The old documents weren't bound volumes, but scrolls. New items were in a dresser, and the collection of books took up the walls. And what we were looking for was probably something that was written with a fountain pen or a calligraphy blush. brush. Calligraphy blush is what happens when your girlfriend writes your name all fancy and then shows it to you with the little hearts dotting the I's. Because of some comparatively recent notes, I could barely read it, but the old writing on those pages was entirely beyond me. It wasn't a problem with the situation with Yasumi, but a problem with the style of writing.
休み読めるの？
一応なんとか。
After giving a strained smile, Yasumi furrowed her brow and concentrated on reading the esoteric text. The only thing I could do was stay quiet and not get in her way.
そんな嘘です。
休み？
ちょっと待ってください。ちゃんと読みますから。間違いかもしれませんから。
Shutting the bound volume, Yasumi gave a big sigh. It was longer and heavier than what she would give just with reading something she was unfamiliar with. Huh.
信じたくないようなことばかり書いてありました。
And then Yasumi opened her mouth and began speaking about those grave matters.
鬼退治の昔話よりずっと昔。だけど安姫様が来る前に一人の陰陽師が最悪の続く島に来たんです。先輩、九郎様のお祭りでは牛を生贄に捧げますけど、最初に取れたものは全て神様のものということで、陰陽師の指示で。
So, at the start, any conceivable thing could be offered to Kuro-sama.
それは人間も例外じゃなかったそうです。
人って瞳悟空。
はい。
それって大昔の話よね。
一応そうなんでしょうか。マダムのような化け物が出たのは九郎様の祭り方が正しくなかったせいって。
If the calamity had appeared in front of them and then they saw it evaded, the people of the island would have had no choice. People weren't exempt, and one's own children weren't exempt either.
安姫様が島に来てマダムを封じてから、安姫様がより正しい儀式をネカタに伝えて、そしてその風習がなくなったそうです。
Only the name and the ceremony of a sacrifice play where an ox was sacrificed to a god remained.
表向きの話ですけど。
In the end, a secret ritual like that could only have such an outward appearance.
結論から言います。火の薬は床先の椿を使って作るものではありませんでした。けれど製法を知ったからといってうち以外で作れるものではありませんでした。
The secret of the miraculous medicine that was passed to the Nakata was
血には力が宿っている。私も先輩の血のおかげで昨日からいろいろあったにもかかわらずなんとか倒れないで動いてますけど、血の力にも強い弱いがあるそうです。特別に濃く強い血がニエの血と呼ばれていたんだそうですけど、火の薬の正体は安姫様自身の血。ネカタの家は昔からずっと安姫様を封じてその生き血を絞り取ってきたんです。
Here we go.
人魚の肉を食べた安姫様が不老不死になったみたいに、安姫様の血を飲んだ人には強い力が宿るんだそうです。ただ普通の人には強すぎて毒になるから、薬として使うときには成分の一部としてごく薄くして使うそうなんです。
The head of the Nakata thought of this after seeing Yasuhime-sama going around and healing the sick people of the island. His thinking was that if he could sacrifice, or if the sacrifice had strong power, it could take the place of countless other weaker sacrifices.
マタムを封じた安姫様はその封じが長く永遠に続くように封じの要である椿の木に自分の力を 分け与えたんだそうです。たくさんの力を使った安姫様はしばらくこの島で休むことにしたんですけど。
This was an unexpected opportunity for Nakata-san, who couldn't think of a way to capture Yasuhime-sama normally. And so, Yasuhime-sama vanished, and the people of the island believed that it was thanks to her that the sacrifices ceased.
だからネカタのご先祖様は全てを自分たちだけで片付けることにしたんです。つまりニエとなるのはネカタの長子。子供のうちの誰を生贄にするかなんてことは決められないから、それまでの決まり通り最初の子供を生贄にするって。だからきっとお姉ちゃんは。
Her words were a trowel which uncovered a layer of my own memory. That wasn't it. The one that was cut down shouldn't have been Yasumi's older sister, but me. Because I knew this. Because I knew the fear of watching the blade of Nakata Munetsugu coming down on me. And with that blade, my head... After learning about the blood-soaked past of the Nakata, Yasumi and I felt stifled and left the mansion, going into its garden. How many times had Yasumi and I sighed in that moment? No matter how many times we did, the heavy, oppressive atmosphere in our chests wouldn't leave us.
まさか私の家がこんなことをしていた家系だったなんて。
Yasumi, who had an active imagination, might be thinking that continuing to suck blood might really turn her into an Oni. The black shadow of the mansion in the middle of the darkness wrapped around her, around Nakata Yasumi. The kendo manager that I knew was kind and gave an abashed smile every time I saw her. I couldn't let Aizawa Yasumi stay here a second longer. This wasn't about the condition of Yasumi's body anymore. Even if the Hinokusuri could heal her, since she knew how it was made, I don't think that she'd ever want to drink it. We thought we would be able to figure out something if we came to Urashima, but it might have been better if we hadn't come at all. Comparing the ritual here with Yasumi's draining of spiritual energy, hers looked almost cute in comparison. At least in Yasumi's case, if I stayed by her side, then we wouldn't have to trouble anyone else. Even if we stayed on Urashima any longer.
そろそろ帰ろうか。
それは困る。相沢康美。いや、私の娘、根方康美よ。
Well, that doesn't seem good. Nakata-san, who should have still been gone for a while, passed by the gate and crossed into the courtyard. And he called Yasumi his daughter.
私が気づいていないと思ったか。これでも血を分けた父親なのだぞ。
お父さん。
君たちは、いや、休み。この島に戻ってきたのは。
As if Nakata-san realized something strange, for a moment his expression twisted and distorted.
お母さんはどうした？
今年の冬、節分の後に交通事故で。
そうか。お前たちが口をつむぎ、姿を隠したままでいたなら、私は探し出したりはしなかっただろう。今までのように。
If Yasumi's mother hadn't died, she wouldn't have come to this island and might have been living peacefully. But her mother passed away, and Yasumi returned here. Not just to Unasaka, but even crossing the Oni stepping stones and going past the gate of the Nakata mansion. He'd seen the light on in the study then. Neither Yasumi nor I could answer him. But Nakata-san could guess just by looking at our expressions.
そうか。ネカタ代々の罪。過去と今を知ってしまったか。
この本に書いてあることは本当のことなんですか？お父さんは本当に誰かを切ってクロウ様の生贄にしたりしたんですか？
ああ、切ったことがある。
お姉ちゃんがいなくなったのは
無関係ではない。
Did Nakata-san really kill his own child, the oldest daughter of the family and Yasumi's sister, as a sacrifice to Kuro-sama? Then was the memory made of bubbles that floated up from deep within me just my imagination? Was that just a hallucination?
それよりもだ、休み。お前はなんと間が悪い時に、そしてなんと間が良い時に私の前に現れたのだ。こうも特例が重なり、あからさまな強調が出ている以上、よもや一代に一人限りのニエなどと悠長なことが言ってはいられまい。早急に新たなニエをクロウ様に捧げ、真の儀式を執り行う必要がある。
His sharp, straightforward gaze captured Yasumi. Was Nakata-san saying that following his eldest daughter, he was now going to offer his second daughter to the Nakatas' sea god?
この子はネカタ休みじゃない。相沢休みだ。私と一緒に向こうに戻ってみんなと一緒に正常に帰る。剣道部マネージャーの相沢休みだ。
私がクロウ流の宗家だと知って剣を向けるのかね。
My eyes gave my answer as I stayed silent and held Kumochi in a fighting stance.
儀式には島の、いや、災いが島から溢れたならうなさかの、うなさかから溢れたなら近隣一帯の全てがかかっているのだ。
That's why he was going to lay a hand on his own daughter, and that is why he'd killed people before.
私がこの手で捧げたニエは正しい資格のニエではなかった。彼女は火の薬に耐える体を持っていたが、幼少より摂取してきたわけではなかった。幼い翔子さんと言ったね。
だとしたら
その構えを見て思い至った。君の名字に覚えはないが、君の名前の方にはある。私は鳴海翔子だとばかり思っていたのだがね。
姉妹のような親戚ですから。
似ているな。構え方だけでなく、目の底の光まで。そうして誰かを背中にかばっているというところまで。
あなたと夏姉さんが。
I should have known this. I should have known this. It was within the ocean of my memory, deep in an abyss where the light didn't reach. At that time, in front of my eyes, Natsune-san was...
私がこうしている以上、その時の結果もおのずと知れたものだ。剣を手に敵に対した時、ましてや真剣を握った相手を前にした時、別のことを考えるものではない。今度こそクロウ様の身元に行くがいい。
Ah, like I thought. It hadn't been Yasumi's older sister. Sinking. I was sinking deep down. The bubbles of memory struck me and burst. One by one, those bubbles held onto the light of past memories. The sound of them bursting caused the waves of the past to vibrate. Blurb, 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 blurb. The continuous flickering pictures strung together like a movie film, and the fragmented bubbles made me recall that memory.
娘にも罰を与えるんだ。
翔子ちゃん、翔子ちゃん、助けてあげる。私を起こしたばかりにこんな風になってしまう。私はもう長く生きすぎました。いくら2を口にした者が長生きすると言っても、あのお方はすでにこの世にいないでしょう。長く時が経ちすぎました。ですから私はもうこれ以上の生はいりません。ですから私はあなたに生を与えましょう。
The beautiful person with long black hair and a fluttering kimono like a fish's fins came close to me, sinking in the red-stained water. Her hand felt warm as she touched my cheek, since my body had become as cold as the waves around me. Her lips touched my small lips, which had become as blue as the ocean. Within my mouth, crimson life entered, and with that, a strong power. A blue light pierced through the muddied red water and struck my eyes.
これは封じられた瑠璃球の門。ここまで開くようになるには相当な力が。我はことの葉紡ぐ人なり、我がことの葉こそ御事のりなり。門よ、閉じなさい。
Following that decree, the gate closed. The illumination from the other world of lapis lazuli light also disappeared. Blackness. Ah. Is it nighttime now?
翔子、翔子。
The azure light swayed and flickered. The person that that floated up in the water from the middle of that azure light was...
安姫様。
No, it wasn't Yasuhime-sama.
翔子先輩。翔子先輩、気がつきました？
Yasumi's face was close enough that I'd be able to feel her breath. She peered at me like one would check on the temperature of a sick patient. This might be a familiar view for Yasumi, who collapsed often, but for me, whose saving grace was my sturdy body, for me, whose parents were busy and left me alone, in these past 8 years, it's been rare for someone to see my sleeping face. And also, why had I collapsed? The previous events, which I'd not been aware of until now, came back to me. I remembered that I'd been defeated by Nakata-san, and this caused me to panic and bolt upright.
ここは。
I was in the middle of the forest. I was in the middle of an azure forest where the large moon peeked through the gaps in the trees, lighting up the darkness below. This wasn't the Sala forest of Shoshinji, though as I looked up, I didn't see any Tsubaki flowers.
床先の椿の森です。
なんで私、あなたのお父さんに倒されて。ってあなた、その体どうしたの？
私の体だと先輩を運ぶのは無理だと思ったから、勝手に翔子先輩に乗り移ってここまで。
Possessing the body of your unconscious girlfriend is a handy and convenient method of moving her from place to place, especially removing her from dangerous situations. I am familiar with this technique. I've seen it in fiction before.
先輩が気絶したのを確認した直後でしたから、さすがのお父さんも油断してたみたいです。
それで、休みの体はどこ？
ここにはないです。
Though she looked a bit troubled, Yasumi still smiled.
ネカ たの屋敷に置いてきちゃいました。
休み。
I could only let out a scream. Why would she do such a thing?
だってあのままだと絶対翔子先輩が生贄にされるって思ったんで、つい。
まったくついじゃないわよ。
I wanted to give her a light poke, but the way she was now, my finger would only go through her. Even so, I pretended to give her a little poke, which caused her to laugh while apologizing.
それであなたの体今どうなってるの？
一度体に戻って向こうの様子を探ってみようと思ったんですけど。
According to her, there was something like an invisible string that tied her physical body to her soul.
それより先輩、気づいてます？この森、災いを封じた安姫様の椿。夕方も変でしたけど、今はもうそれ以上に。
椿の花が落ちている。
In this forest of Tokusaki no Tsubaki, not one bunch nor one flower remained. They had all scattered to the ground. What in the world had happened while we were gone? What had happened while I was unconscious?
歪んだ力が漏れてるみたいで、体なしでここにいると私までおかしくなっちゃいそうです。
Like how the water conforms to its container, the soul is also bound to the physical body. But looking at it in the opposite way, the body fixes the form of the soul, which can easily change its shape, just as Yasumi was now. Although there was special cases of possession where a change in the soul could also cause a change in the body.
お父さんが言っていた強調ってこのことなんでしょうか？
それは違うと思うけど。
The Nakata ritual was started before the Tokusaki no Tsubaki had been planted, so their scattering shouldn't itself be the bad omen. No, it might be a bad omen if the power of the sacrifices weakened, and the Tsubaki, symbol of Yasuhime-sama's power, scattered. However, I thought there might be something else to it.
ところでこれからのことなんですけど。
Yasumi sat up straight and looked directly at me.
明け方の引き潮で先輩は一度昇進寺に戻ってくれませんか？
Her face said that she wasn't kidding.
翔子先輩は確かに普通の女子高生としては強いです。でもお父さんはもっともっと強いんです。
I know that. I can't win against Nakata. He even defeated Natsune-san. I knew that I couldn't defeat him. But then
私は
Yasumi
お
would...
父さんのこともありますし。
セーブするファイルは選んで。セーブするファイルは選んで。
So, I'll give you all a hint, which you probably won't need, but saying that you'll go back right now will lead to a bad ending, but as you may remember from Mingiwa's route, bad endings at this point in the game are often necessary to unlock routes later, so I've created a convenient safety save for that point. But since I know that we'll have to do both of these choices, I will let everyone here decide one last time before we close for tonight which way that will go. So, should we proceed with Yasumi's route proper, or should we take a slight detour to take a bad ending? And of course, I see. Very well. I will take care of that bad ending at another time.
戻るときはあなたも一緒よ。それもきちんと体も込みで。
I couldn't leave Yasumi behind and just meekly return to the temple. If I left her here and ran away, I'd regret it for the rest of my life.
でも
取るまでよ。とにかく私は帰らない。私を嘘つきにさせるつもりなの？
Because we'd made a promise. I definitely wrapped my little finger with the one on Yasumi's body, which wasn't here.
針1000本なんて勘弁願いたいわ。それに少し先のことよりもすぐそこまで差し迫った事態のことを考えないと。
差し迫った？
あなたの力弱くなってるわ。
Yasumi's body was even more transparent than it had been before. That meant she didn't have the power to maintain this temporary form.
体がないですから仕方ないです。
Being housed in a physical body protects the soul from the danger of being transformed or dispersed. And having a bare soul out in this forest where twisted power was leaking out was the equivalent of suicide. Yasumi was continuing to expend power just to maintain her shape.
仕方ないなんて言わないで。消えないための方法ならあるんだから。でも
If she doesn't have enough power, then it'll be fine just to supplement it. If water continually leaks from a vessel with a hole in it, then it's fine to just keep filling the vessel before it ever empties out. If, in order for that to happen, I also vowed that I'd do as much as I can.
私の力を吸いなさい。
When I laid down on the ground for a second time, I saw the large moon hanging in the sky.
翔子先輩。
Even though Yasumi was on top of me, the brilliance of the moon didn't dim or wane. Though Yasumi was transparent, if the moon was still so bright, that emphasized how transparent she'd become. Yasumi's spirit, which was separated from her soul, had finally gotten so dim that its existence was uncertain. There wasn't much time left. I turned my head to the side, exposing my neck. Yasumi, the spirit, could drain power from anywhere, but I thought conjuring an easy image of where to suck from would help. Yasumi didn't have any objections, as she put her face near my neck.
でもいいですか？
いいわよ。
I opened the palm of my hand gently, and Yasumi put her half-transparent hand on top of mine. We intertwined our fingers so as not to separate from one another, but the feeling was like grasping at air.
で、ちゃんとつなげませんね。
あなたの力が弱まってるからよ。ちゃんと吸って力をつけたらもっとしっかりつなげるはずよ。
Yes, yes, you must suck your girlfriend's blood in order to properly hold hands.
はい。
Let this be a lesson.
失礼します。
The feel of her lips on my neck was lighter than a feather and really no different from a sigh. Like the Earth's underground water channels, the skin had blood vessels beneath it, so that might be a good place to drain power. Her lips moved around as if searching for a good place and caused a ticklish sensation.
痛かったですか？
痛いわけないでしょ。今のあなたには体がないんだから。
It seemed that Yasumi was biting down, but since she didn't have actual teeth and lips, the feeling was light and didn't hurt at all.
ちょっとくすぐったかっただけよ。
The body that was capable of physically hurting me wasn't here, and yet she was still uneasy.
大丈夫よ。我慢できるぐらいだから。
But then, whether it was because she was able to reach my power or not, that ticklish feeling became mixed in with just a little bit of pain. That was proof of Yasumi's existence. Which is why I sought out that pain and hugged Yasumi's head. I was happy that I was able to feel her soft hair.
私の力が休みに流れ込んでいるのがわかるわ。
Now I could definitely feel the sensation of our hands on top of one another and our intertwined fingers. Yes, yes,
私も先輩と
yes, Bis. As I mentioned earlier in the stream, we did need to reset that timer many times tonight.
翔子先輩とつながってるのがわかります。
And with that,
これでしばらく大丈夫だと思います。
good. I think she'll be okay for a little while.
セールは
And
ここよ。
because she'll be okay for a little while, we're going to leave off here with Aoi Shiro until next week, in which we will absolutely finish Yasumi's route.
セーブするファイルを選んで。
We're probably actually just about an hour left, but, you know,
セーブするファイルを選んで。
I wonder why that part is called 2 men and 2 feet, but who can tell? Thank you
画
all
面に戻る？
once again for joining me on this journey. We learned some truly amazing things tonight and saw some truly amazing things tonight. Yasumi's route really does escalate rapidly in a way that I don't think most people expect, especially given the way that she starts out as the heart condition character, sort of just vaguely, oh, this is a very sweet and wholesome relationship without too many complications. And then, you know, you get into an ancient figure from folklore has actually been held captive by my family and drained for the healing properties of her blood, which has been fed to the members of my family to use in a sacrificial ritual to appease an ancient sea god. You can see why this compels me, or rather, it definitely compelled me when I was younger. So, with that, we will leave off until next week, and until then, good night, everyone. Thank you for joining me, and please, please remember to,
随分と前に亡く
I
なった
mean, you know, if anybody seems a little faint near you, especially any girls, just ask them if they need to suck your blood in order to sustain
見知
their
らぬ者との
eternal
出会い
soul.
が大好きで
Good night.